Shigaraki Tomura, first introduced as a misguided man-child and now the story's symbol of fear, is a polarizing character. We haven't had the opportunity to watch his growth as closely as we have Midoriya, but we have seen change. From the beginning, there were guesses as to how he became so destructive and insensitive, but after this video, there will be no need for guesses. In this video, we'll look back on the traumatic life of Shigaraki Tomura, grandson of Shimura Nana, the predecessor of the former symbol of justice, All Might, and our story's main antagonist. This is the symbol of fear, Shigaraki Tomura, origin. Fair warning now, this video will contain manga spoilers. I'd love for you all to stay with us for the story, but to the anime only fans, I understand if you must go. Also, as always, all colored manga panels were done by us here at Plot Armor. Now with that out of the way, let's get into it. The story began with Tenko Shimura, the child that would later grow and become Shigaraki Tomura. Being the son of Shimura Nana's child who grew to become a successful businessman at a young age, Tenko was born into wealth. At the time of the following events, Tenko was 5 years old, a year past the time that most children develop their quirks, and so it was thought that he might be quirkless. Despite this, Tenko wanted to be a hero, and his father was very much against this, punishing him every time he was caught playing hero, something Tenko loved to do. After one time in particular where he was thrown out of the house for breaking this rule, he would be comforted by his mother. Around this time, he'd been dealing with pretty severe itchiness, thought to be allergies, and his mother was attending to this when they would also talk about the problem at hand. She would ask him if he still wants to be a hero despite getting in trouble, and Tenko would explain that yes, he does, explaining that what had happened was nobody wanted to play with two kids, so he offered to play with them, leading to pretending to be heroes. It's pretty crazy considering what would later happen in his life, but while playing, one of these kids even suggested that he should pretend to be All Might. His mother looked on sadly as he held her, letting out his feelings, asking why does his father say no all the time, does he hate him, and will he like him if he gets a quirk? She would do her best to comfort Tenko, assuring him that his father doesn't hate him, and explaining that he just knows how hard it is for heroes, referring to his father's experience with Shimura Nana. While I'm sure Nao was making a genuine effort to comfort Tenko, she should have done more because unfortunately after this point, it would be too late. Later on, Tenko's sister Hana would show him something hidden in their father's office, a photo of him and his mother, Shimura Nana. It was through seeing this image and Hana's explanation that Tenko learned there was a hero in his family. When asked why she showed him this photo, Hana showed support for Tenko's dream, even saying they could be a brother-sister hero team in the future. With everything he'd been through with his father, the look on his face after hearing all this said a lot. Following his talk with Hana, Tenko was feeling great. Now knowing his family had a hero in it gave him hope. He felt like he could take on the world. Unfortunately though, this momentary joy would be cut short, beginning with a sudden shock to his body. Before Tenko could even fully react to that, however, his father was now approaching him outside angrily, asking if Tenko had looked in his study room and if he'd seen it. It being the picture of Shimura Nana. The look on Tenko's face was one of fear. He froze, unable to utter a word. Meanwhile, the rest of his family was there, including Hana, who was bawling her eyes out and unfortunately putting all the blame on Tenko. A few seconds later, his father Kotaro would raise his hand and then with force hit him. Tenko's mother screamed no in an attempt to stop him, but it was too little too late. It was a sweltering day, which was visible in Kotaro's face as he stood over Tenko and explained that Shimura Nana was a monster that abandoned her child. Still unable to speak during this, Tenko had thoughts rushing to his head. Help, don't just watch. But Kotaro continued. Heroes are people who hurt their own families, only to help complete strangers. Help for Tenko wouldn't come. Later that day, alone in his study, Kotaro would read the final words his mother, Shimura Nana, left for him. Something he probably hadn't looked at in a long time. I'm sorry for leaving you suddenly. Your mom has to go fight a really bad man now. The bad man might try to do mean things to you, Kotaro, and that's why we can't be together anymore. I'm sorry I couldn't be more of a normal mom for you. You might decide to hate me, but please know, no matter what happens, I will always love you. I will always love you, Kotaro. I hope you can live a life full of smiles and joy, knowing that your mom is watching over you from heaven. With sorrow, Kotaro could only say to himself, I'd rather you never love me. The rest of the adults in the family barged into the room, with his wife first saying that what he'd just done was too much. He was quick to admit that he'd gone too far and asked how the kids were. Frustrated, Nao ignored his questions and continued on, saying the family aren't going to play by his rules if he was going to get violent, and then reminding him that he'd promised them a home full of joy. He could only respond that he didn't want it to be the way it was going. His own childhood pains were harming his family and he could now see it, but it was too late. Tenko was still outside where he'd often play. This time though, he was sobbing and clinging to his dog for comfort. However, something was happening. That shock he felt earlier was his quirk manifesting. Before he could even look and see what had begun to happen, he'd caused his pet dog to decay. Now with a pool of blood and only the remains of his dog at his feet, in shock, Tenko would try to catch his breath. Before he could though, Hana stepped outside to apologize for earlier. Nervous, she looked down while speaking, saying that she shouldn't have said those things to her father earlier, all while Tenko was still struggling to speak. It was then that Hana saw Tenko sitting in blood next to what was their pet dog. She screamed and began to run. Tenko was still in shock, itching all over and couldn't speak, but had a million thoughts rushing to his head. He wanted to tell Hana, "Don't go. I thought you were here to apologize for earlier. You have to protect me." Wanting her to stay, he grabbed her. Up to this point, Tenko had thought some villain had targeted their family and got their dog, but then the same thing happened to his sister. She crumbled into a million pieces. He still thought it was a villain's doing. He went mad, scratching his face, crying and throwing up at the sight of his sister's remains. Years later, while reflecting, Shigaraki realizes that maybe he knew what was happening. He knew there was no villain. He knew what he was doing. Moments after Hana's death, his mother and grandparents ran outside to see what was happening. For years, his family would make up excuses for his father. All they ever said to comfort him was, "Don't cry." It built up inside him, little by little, over time. Still drowning in madness, Tenko reached out to his family and then touched the ground, causing it to break apart. This destruction spread to his mother first, causing her leg to begin to decay. The damage spread throughout her body and she looked at her son, now resembling a monster. Her face showed concern and she reached out to hold him, but in that moment Tenko held her and the fatal damage had been done, dying, leaving a hand holding him. At that moment the decay continued to spread and destroyed the backyard and his grandparents. They were all gone, leaving Tenko alone in the now bloodied backyard that he'd always known. Moments later, Kotaro made his way to the backyard where he saw the remains of the family, a lot of damage, and a crying Tenko. His face said 1,000 words as he took in the sight and remembered the words his mother left for him. "I hope you can live a life full of smiles and joy." After noticing him, Tenko, still crying and barely able to speak, began to apologize and approach his father, causing more damage. Kotaro lost his footing and fell while Tenko continued to approach, and then in panic grabbed a nearby tool for defense, hitting Tenko with force, hoping to stop him, to no avail. He finally reached out his hand and exclaimed, "Stop," but seeing that only drove Tenko to even greater madness, he dashed, brimming with unmistakable bloodlust, and touched his father's face. In his own words, it filled him with maddening ecstasy. The look of joy on his face said it all. He'd been dying for this moment. The home built by his father that rejected him crumbled and fell, joining his family's remains in the earth's dust. And just like that, the itch was gone. After these events, drowning in guilt and unsure of what to do next, Tenko ran away from home. Not that there was any home left for him, hoping somebody would help him. He walked aimlessly, unable to speak from the guilt that lodged itself in his throat. People would notice him and then look away. He was dirty and almost looked possessed. He began to think that the reason no one was saving him in this hero-filled society was because he was being punished for killing his family. If only back then someone had reached out to help, then maybe the itch would have been gone for good. The hand that reached out to him was that of All for One. He's a smart man, but also a deceptive one, so his words can't be taken as fact. However, in explaining Tenko's situation, he said that Tenko has an impulse to destroy that can't be controlled, and that the itching is his body's way of letting him know. Then finally adding that Tenko doesn't need to endure it because it's not necessarily a bad thing. Tenko now had his new mentor and a place to return to, but he still had remains of his old ways. One day when in an alley, he was being roughed up by some troublemakers for being on their turf. Anger built up and it looked like Tenko was ready to attack them, but he held back, instead opting to clutch his fists and then take the beating. All for One used this as a learning opportunity, molding the young boy's mind with his speech. You should act as your heart commands, or else you'll be the one to suffer. Conscience, morals, ethics were all fabrications invented by others, people who wanted to run the world smoothly as they saw fit. Don't let these fabrications restrain you. Don't cower in fear, because what lies within you is more important than anything. Then finally asking Tenko, what do you want to do? A beat up and emotional Tenko's words were immature but strong. Those guys that beat me up, I want to kill them. The feelings continued to pour out. It's like this bad feeling is filling me up and I can't stop it. I can't hold it back. As he said these words, he reached and crushed one of the hands that remained from his family that were earlier collected by All for One and the doctor. To all this, All for One could only smile and say, then to you I say, try your best. On a rainy night, Tenko would return to the same area, now wearing his family's remains. Intending to keep the feelings associated with these memories close, he would find what he was looking for, the same men that beat him up earlier. However, this time, things would play out differently. While the deed went down, All for One and the doctor stood above watching. During this, All for One explained that Tenko had not lost his memories but merely shut them away. The family's hands will restrain him while his memories remain locked away, and only unstable emotions will float to the surface. From there, the plan would begin to make him the symbol of fear who lusts for destruction. Tenko felt sick after adding to his body count, but also calm. Finally in his life, he was now allowed to do whatever he wanted. The group would meet up at what was now Tenko's new home and would commence their celebration, for Tenko had been reborn. As a gift, All for One would give him the hands of the two thugs that he took out and a couple other hands as a bonus to keep his memories close. With this celebration came the birth of Tomura Shigaraki. Tomura meaning to mourn because he'd now been reborn as one who beckons acts of mourning into this world. And as for Shigaraki, that is All for One's family name. For years, All for One would go on to nurture Shigaraki, making him the man we now know. That's all I have for you guys on his backstory. I hope you enjoyed the video. For more great My Hero Academia content similar to this video, be sure to subscribe to Plot Armor, and in the comments let us know which character you'd like to see us cover next. Until next time, I'm KJ, have a great day, goodbye.